Thanks for everyone for joining us. My name is Raquel Durban. I'm a registered dietitian in Charlotte, North Carolina. I work at Asthma and Allergy Specialists as the director of our food allergy division. And today I have joining me as my assistant, Don McCoy. Don, do you want to talk a little bit about yourself?
Sure, thanks so much. I'm glad to be here. I'm a parent of a child, young son, with eosinophilic esophagitis, and I'm delighted to assist here today.
So today we're going to go through 5 different recipes using amino acid-based formula, just to show you guys some versatility. I think that sometimes we think of amino acid-based formula and we just think of it being fluid, right? What else can we do with it? A lot of my patients are on sole source of nutrition as amino acid-based formula, and even if they're using it to supplement, it gets a little mundane, right? You're drinking the same flavor every day, the same consistency every day. So how can we make it more exciting? And certainly not all of these recipes will apply to every patient, but what's really valuable is to see the versatility of formula and what you can do with it. So as we go along, feel free to stop if something doesn't seem right or you need some clarity. There are recipe books as well spread out on the back table. Help yourself to a recipe book, and let's start having some fun making some recipes. So the first recipe that we're going to make is strawberry banana kiwi. So we've got a little summertime tropical treat. Most of these will be iced or frozen. So this particular recipe is going to start with 4 unpacked scoops of unflavored formula. And just to speak a little bit more about measurements, the unpacked scoops, we talk about them being unpacked for a reason. When you pack the scoops, you're changing the nutritional content of each one of those scoops. So we anticipate that they'll be a little bit different for each unpacked scoop, but we don't want to shove them all of the formula in there as well. And it's just about the nutritional content. All right, so we've got our scoop here. And most of your cans of formula are going to have that lip on the inside of the can, and you can use that to help level off what we're doing. So we're going to be mixing this formula into the shaker ball, and we're going to be using 4 scoops of it. One, 2, 3, and 4. And you'll see that as we go, we'll be switching between flavored formula as well as unflavored formula, just thinking about what recipe we're actually making. We're going to also be using apple juice for this recipe, and the apple juice amount will be 2 ounces. All right, so for liquids, we're going to be using a measuring cup. So looking for, sometimes it's like a clear glass cup that you might be using, but this would be the way that we'd want to measure our liquids versus using a teaspoon or a tablespoon. This will be more for our solid or gelled foods. Thank you. So 2 ounces. Okay. And then we're going to pour that into our cup here and then mix the 2 ounces of apple juice with our amino acid-based unflavored formula. Do you want to give that a good shake for me?
Oh, sure.
Okay. All right, and then we have our blender, and this is where we're going to start mixing it up. So with the blender, we're going to be using about 1/2 a cup of frozen sliced strawberries, unsweetened. So you can certainly purchase these from the produce section, go ahead and pre-slice them yourself and freeze them, or you can purchase them already packaged in the freezer section. But we want them to still be frozen so that we can get that sort of slushy texture that we're looking for. So 1/2 a cup. All right, a little bit more. All right, so we'll go ahead and you want to put that in the blender. And then our next ingredient will be the kiwi. So the kiwi that we have is actually diced kiwi. So dicing versus slicing is a little bit different and will lend some different consistencies and textures when we're making the foods. So the strawberries are sliced, and we're able to see that it's a more thin cut of a strawberry. Let me get one that's not frozen together. So it has a more thin profile to it, but if we're looking at the kiwi, which has actually been diced, it's more of a cube shape. So each of these will lend a different consistency to whatever it is that you're making. All right, so we're going to be using 1/2 of a peeled and diced kiwi. All right, and we'll go ahead and put that in there. And then we're going to be using, again, that same technique that we use with the strawberries of slicing it. And so we have some bananas, and they have been sliced. And we're going to use 1/2 of a sliced and frozen banana. So picking a banana can kind of be tricky, because when we pick bananas, we see that some are yellow with green on them, some are more brown with the spots on them, and each of those is going to lend a different flavor profile as well as a different consistency. So the ones that are more brown tend to be sweeter, right? We notice that the brownness usually leads to more sugar content. And then the ones that are green tend to be more firm and maybe even a little bit more bitter. So just be considerate of whatever it is that you're making when you're purchasing your bananas. And there's a little trick: if you put bananas inside of a brown paper bag and roll it up, it helps to make them age a little bit faster and get a greater sugar content. So we're going to be using about 1/2 of a banana. There you go. All right, and then the dietitian excitement part of this recipe is the strawberry syrup that we're going to be using. I know that strawberry syrup doesn't necessarily sound very dietitian exciting, but we have to think about the quality of life of the patient. We've got all these great nutritious fruits, we've got great nutritious amino acid-based formula, but what about the sweetness? What about the flavor? What about the excitement? And that's, I think, where sometimes syrups can be really valuable to patients. So for this particular recipe, we're using 2 tablespoons of strawberry flavored syrup. One and 2. And then we're going to be, Dawn, if you want to add 2 to 3 ice cubes to that. Sure. And then we'll go ahead and blend this up, and we'll pour it out into some sample cups for you guys to give it a try. Any questions or thoughts on that recipe? Sure. So this particular syrup is commercially available. Each brand of syrups or additives will have their own ingredients, and it's just important that you verify with those ingredients that they're appropriate for the patient or your diet. But this particular one was commercially available. Any other questions about that particular recipe? All right. If you want to pour that one out, and I'll get started on the next one. And then in between each of these recipes, we're going to be changing our gloves. So this goes back to cross-contamination, thinking about food safety when we're preparing our items to ensure that the ingredients that are in that one particular product stay in that one particular recipe and that we're not moving them from recipe to recipe. This would be a good conversation to have in a restaurant or even at home, thinking about food preparation and making sure that we're not cross-contaminating in that way. You'll notice that we also have a different blender for each of these recipes, and that goes back to the cross-contamination. Blenders have all of these little sneaky parts underneath them that tend to get a little bit of dried food, so we wanted to be sure that every one of these recipes was prepared safely. Thank you very much. All right, so for this recipe, it's called peppermint patty. And this goes back to your question about flavorings and if they're commercially available. So this one is using pure extracts that you could, again, verify with your team to be sure that they were appropriate for you. So our first start with this will, again, be with the amino acid-based formula. Any fitted jar with a lid will be appropriate to be mixing in. It can help if there's a little ball or a sieve at the top though, just to make sure we're not getting any lumps. So we are going to start with adding 2 ounces of rice milk into this bottle. Again, we're going to use this clear measuring cup for our liquid measurements. And 2 ounces. That was a good splash.
That was very nice.
Yeah, I planned it that way.
Did
Okay,
y'all see that splash?
that was pretty good. All right, so we've got 2 ounces of our rice milk that we're going to be using for this recipe. If you want to stick that in the for me. And then we're going to be adding vanilla flavored formula. So remember, this recipe is peppermint patty. So think about peppermint flavor and vanilla, but the vanilla might add a little bit more pizzazz to the recipe versus an unflavored. Okay. If you would like to work on the 4 unpacked scoops of the vanilla, and I can go ahead and move forward on this blender jar, we're going to add 2 additional ounces of rice milk to the blender. If I can magically get the lid off. Okay, so 2 additional ounces will be added to our blender. And then this one has chocolate syrup in it. Again, this was a commercially available chocolate syrup that we were able to find. The good news for being able to find commercially available things is it means less work for the patient and the caregiver, right? When we can find things, certainly I think we would all be willing to prepare whatever we needed to ensure the safety and happiness of a patient, but it's nice when you can just buy something. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and pour the additional 2 ounces into there.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Thank you.
And then chocolate syrup. Thank you. The chocolate syrup amount that we're going to be using is going to be 2 to 3 tablespoons of dark chocolate syrup. I really like chocolate, so I'm going to use about 3 tablespoons of chocolate syrup in this recipe. If you're unable to find a dark chocolate syrup that's safe for you, then maybe it would be more appropriate to just use a milk chocolate syrup. And certainly you can make chocolate syrup yourself pretty easily too. All right, so 2 of these. This is pretty good, thick chocolate syrup. You guys see that? This will be a good one to try. All right, so there's our first one. I think I actually squeezed it all out. All right, and then this one's going to end up being a peppermint flavor, again with that vanilla and this really rich chocolate. So hopefully it'll sort of mimic like a commercial peppermint patty. And these recipes can be really valuable because if you think about the ingredients that might actually be in a peppermint patty, they wouldn't be safe for most patients that are on a restricted diet. So this gives them that flavor profile, maybe some different texture, some different mouthfeel, and still the excitement of getting to try something new. All right. And then we're going to be using 1/4 teaspoon of vanilla extract and a little less than 1/4 teaspoon of peppermint extract. For those of you that have used peppermint extract before, it can be a little strong, right? It's kind of strong. So we're going to use just a little less than that. So the first one that we'll go ahead and do will be the peppermint. Wait till I take this lid off. Probably everybody in the room will be able to smell the peppermint because it's such a strong smell. But this can really engage the senses too. If you think about if you're using the same formula every day, your senses are kind of numb to the different smells that you might encounter all around you. So this can be another fun way to motivate younger kids to try new flavors and smells and textures. All right, we ready? Do we all smell the peppermint? It's pretty strong. Okay, So there's our 1/4 teaspoon of peppermint. And then we're going to do our vanilla. I always think vanilla is a nice flavor smell too. Kind of reminds me of like homemade cookies. All right. All right, so now that we've got our vanilla in there, we're gonna go ahead and pour in that remaining mixture of the formula that's been mixed with our rice milk. And we're gonna add some ice cubes to this. About 4 ice cubes will be added. And then we'll go ahead and blend that one up as well. Any questions about this recipe or any thoughts of any feedback? Okay. I think when you guys get to come up here and smell this recipe, you'll be like, wow, this smells really good. Great. I'm going to go ahead and grab the apple juice that we had from the first recipe so that we can use it with this one as well. So the next one that we're making is lemon crush. Again, another really fun summery type of beverage that we could be using. There are like little paper snow cone cups that maybe you could even serve this in. Again, going back to the quality of life to make it fun and really inclusive, using a different type of method of even providing it to the patient. So lemon crush is going to be 2 ounces of apple juice that we're going to go ahead and pour into our fitted jar. And you'll notice we changed our gloves again in between. All right. So for 2 ounces of apple juice, we'll go ahead and measure that out. And the nice thing about all these recipes is what you'll notice is consistency. The first thing we're doing is usually mixing a liquid with the formula into the bottle. This would be a great way to even get a younger patient involved in providing or making these products for themselves, because it's kind of the same process for each of them. So for this particular one, we're going to be adding vanilla formula. And this one will require 4 unpacked scoops if you want to work on that for me. Thank you. And then we're going to again be using the blender that we have here, and I'll try to prop it up a little bit for you guys, with an additional 2 ounces of apple juice and some lemon juice. So we're going to use freshly cut lemons. This can also lend a little more of that flavor profile and texture, because there's a little bit of the pulp that's going to get into it, and maybe that would add a little bit of texture. I think that sometimes, again, with formula, it's the same texture and the same feeling and over. So maybe this will help to lend a little bit more pizzazz to the recipe. All right, so 2 more ounces of apple juice. Maybe this lid will be a bit easier for us to get off.
Like a top hat.
Yeah, this one's got... Almost there.
So Raquel, question for you.
Sure.
While you do these variety, what are the sort of leads that you have for what was the influence for saying, peppermint and then maybe a little variety? Was it just?
I usually think about food and the way that it smells and the way that the mouthfeel. And I always think about the patient and the experiences that you might be missing out on if you're just using elemental formula. And you can really miss out on the chew of food or the texture of food and the smell. I feel like the way that we eat is so much more than just eating to fuel our bodies. Food is really emotional, right? When we think about food, we're thinking about the way that it makes us feel. I really can't get this lid off. Do you want to help me?
Oh, I sure will. I'll try. You want to trade?
Sure.
Okay.
I think about the way that food makes us feel, the emotions that it might actually be evoking. And so when choosing a recipe or building a plan for a patient, I try to include all of those quality of life aspects because I want them to feel just as excited about formula as they would about food. Way to go.
I'm one step ahead here.
Thank you. All right, so we will pour an additional 2 ounces of apple juice into this one. What do you find most valuable about having recipes that you can make?
Oh, I think the variety. I mean, this is a great assortment of use of variety of ingredients. So I think it really helps when you have something that could be like a summertime, maybe a fall, different times of year.
The peppermint patty one really reminds me of more of like a winter variety. But I like that each of these is kind of seasonal. So cutting a lemon, you're gonna put the 2 ends out this way on the side, and then you'll cut right through the center of it, and then we're gonna juice both of these. I really like being able to be creative with formula. I think there's a lot more beyond the can that you can do with them. All right, so we've got this one being juiced right now. These juicers are nice. There are handheld ones as well, and certainly you can squeeze it out with your hand, but this is nice because it catches all the seeds so that you're not accidentally getting a seed in there too, because those can be kind of bitter. All right. This is also a fun way to get kids involved in the kitchen. Do any of you have smaller children that might be on the diet? Something, certainly not giving them the sharp knife, but giving them the juicer so that they can really get involved and engaged. Even letting them put the ingredients into the blender so that they feel like they're doing something themselves. It really can empower them to have more options and be more in control of their diet. One thing that I tend to notice in clinic, and you can probably back me up on this, is when you implement changes to a child's diet, it can sometimes lead to that loss of control or feeling that they're not having as many choices. And we want to give you choices. We want to give you options. And beyond the recipes, putting them in control of squeezing the lemon can help give them more opportunity to be engaged.
That's a really good point.
All right. Yes, keep them involved. All right, so we're going to add the lemon juice to this blender if you want to help me out. And then we'll go ahead and put the ice in and then add the blended formula with the rice milk. So this particular recipe, again, was the lemon crush, and it's a great way to get kids involved in making the recipes.
We were having challenge too. You're going to pour on the side?
Pour it out on the side.
I was just going to go ahead. I was like, well, we want to add that in. I don't want near a seed. The seeds can stay out.
There you go, I got you. Okay. Any questions about that recipe? If any of these, as we're making them, you guys want to come up and try them, you're welcome to grab a cup right now if you'd like to. And then certainly at the end, we can discuss that too. And I'll go ahead and grab those ice cubes for you.
Oh, I was going to grab some over there. There's more ice. Great. Nice.
All right, if you want to blend that one up and then we can move on.
That'd be super.
It looks really good, doesn't it? It smelled really good.
This was slight. Okay, that did the trick.
Okay.
Guess you have to have the on switch, huh?
Good.
Plugged in. All right, so Dawn has kindly went ahead and opened this next blender jar for me. But as she goes ahead and pours those out, I just, again, went ahead and changed our gloves so that we're not worried about our cross-contamination. And the next recipe we're gonna be making is grape. I have found that grape seems to be a really popular flavor with kids. Maybe it's the sweetness. You can also do a lot, it's pretty versatile. So this recipe is gonna be making sort of a grape slushie. The first part of this will be mixing grape juice into our bottle with our formula. And again, it's 4 scoops. This goes back to the consistency and being able to get the kids involved. All right, so let's use our clear measuring cup and get that grape juice poured out. All right. And then we'll move on to adding that formula into this cup, and it'll again be 4 unpacked scoops. And Don, I will pass that to you if you would like. So 4 unpacked scoops. And then to our blender, we're going to be adding 2 additional ounces of grape juice with some grape jam. So grape jam comes in a lot of different consistencies, right? It can be kind of gelatinous, it can be smoother. Some of the grape jams have like more texture to them. So just being conscientious of that too, because texture means a lot to patients who have an EGID who need to be on amino acid-based formula. So this one is a little bit thinner, but still has some chunks in it, but it should blend out really nicely when we mix it into the blender. All right, so 2 more ounces of our grape juice. And then we'll go ahead and add that jam. And it's actually, this is a all right, 2 ounces. And then we'll mix up our jam in there. Oh, here's your lid for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, we're going to be using 1 tablespoon of the grape jam. So we'll go ahead and remove that spoon that we'd be measuring out our jam. And we'll take out a tablespoon, try to level it off as best as we can, and then go ahead and add that to the blender. And then we're also going to be using 2 tablespoons of frozen concentrate. So frozen concentrate of the grape juice is typically found in like a round looking canister in your freezer section. And it's just this type of a juice that's been concentrated and put into one of those tubes so that when it melts, you get a more syrupy, viscous, sweetened flavor. So this will have lots of great flavor. So for the grape fans in the audience, please feel free to come try this one. And this one we're going to be using 2 tablespoons. Thank you. And to top that off, we will go ahead and pour the formula in. And then we'll be adding 4 to 5 ice cubes to this one as well and blending it, and it'll make a really nice slushy consistency that could be nice for a really hot summer day as well. I'll go ahead and pop this one open for us. All right, so we're on to our very last recipe, and this recipe is called Very Cherry. Any cherry fans in the audience? Okay, I really like cherries. I would say that over grape, cherry, the cherry recipe and the peppermint patty recipe are probably my favorites, but I think the cherry one is sweet, and I've actually done all of these in our clinic, like tried to make different recipes and be creative with formula, and this one has been a favorite of mine. All right, so again, switching our gloves to be sure we're not cross-contaminating. And then we're going to be starting this one with 2 ounces of cherry juice. So we'll go ahead and mix up our cherry juice. One thing I always notice about cherry juice is it kind of settles to the bottom versus the grape. It's like there's more flavor and texture to this particular type of juice. And so you just want to be sure that you're shaking up that bottle to get that out. All right, so 2 ounces of this. We'll go ahead and pour that into this bottle with our lid. All right, you want to do the formula again for me?
Sure.
Thank
That's
you.
Fun.
Here is the vanilla formula.
Sounds great.
Okay, and then the next step will be to add 2 additional ounces of cherry juice to our blender, as well as we're gonna look at this frozen pitted cherries. We've got cherry jam here. See how the consistency of this is so much different than the consistency of the grape jam that we were using, where it was much smoother. So again, imagine how the mouthfeel of this would be different than if we were using the smooth, more gelatinous jelly. And then these are our frozen cherries, and they're sliced. So it goes back to the way that the food is cut to lend a different flavor or texture. So when it's sliced like this, portions of it may lend more of the skin on the outside, versus where if it's an inside piece, it would have more of the flesh of the fruit. All right, got that going for me?
All set.
Okay, so we'll do 2 additional ounces of cherry juice into this blender. Then we'll add our cherries, jam, and ice, and this will be our last recipe, and then feel free to help yourself. Here's our 2 ounces of cherry juice. And all of these are gonna be best if they're chilled, just to be sure that we're keeping it as cool as possible so that it can be more slushy consistency. All right, let's grab our cherries. We're gonna be using about 1/2 cup of the frozen pitted cherries. You can use dark cherries or you can use regular cherries. And certainly if you prefer to purchase them from the produce department, kind of like our frozen strawberries, you can do that prep work ahead of time and just have a little baggie in the freezer. So we're gonna use about 1/2 cup of these. All right, and then we'll move on to 2 tablespoons of our tart cherry jam, using our tablespoon measurements. And then we'll be all set to go ahead and finish up this recipe.
Do you ever change the quantity of ice that you use, more or less?
Some patients prefer it to be more slushy consistency, so we might add a little bit more ice. Some patients just prefer it to be more like a smoothie. So we do change the amount of ice that's in it. That's a good question, because changing the amount of ice can change the entire texture of the recipe and can really improve acceptance or increase the likability of the product. All right, let's get this one whipped up and then we're all set to go. I appreciate you guys joining us for this demonstration, and I hope that you'll enjoy the recipes. Any other questions? Thank you guys for joining us. We appreciate it. This was really fun to have everybody here.